It's the battle of the hyper hatches. The Audi RS3 Sportback and Mercedes-AMG A45S have outgrown the hot hatch moniker, with supercar levels of acceleration, clever all-wheel drive systems and six-figure price tags. But which is best? Stay tuned to find out. Having been out a few years, the A45AMG is a known quantity and sets an extraordinarily high benchmark for the new RS3 to match. Both our contenders have around 300 kilowatts from their turbocharged engines, can hit 100 k's an hour in under 4 seconds thanks to all-wheel drive, and have price tags in excess of $100,000 thanks to a few options. In standard guise, the RS3 is very much the cheaper of the two, at a shade over $90,000 before on-road costs, whereas the A45 costs closer to 107 grand. However, as tested, this RS3 costs $109,074 plus on-road costs, which is a pretty mind-bending amount of money for a hatchback, but that's the world we live in. To be fair, $13,000 of that is in the RS Dynamic package, which adds carbon ceramic brakes and lifts the top speed from 250 to 290 kilometers an hour. Unless your commute involves an autobahn or a runway, I'd probably leave that box unticked. The other 6 grand is in various bits of exterior carbon, and as always, you can make up your own mind as whether the RS3 looks any good or not, but to my eyes, it looks pretty fantastic. In a more subtle colour, it would blend into traffic quite easily, yet there's enough clues, like the flared front guards and the big brakes, that those in the know will know what it is. You're certainly not going to miss the A45, at least not in this spec. The day-glow yellow paint is one thing, but there's no mistaking the intent of all those wings and spoilers. They form part of the optional AMG performance package that lifts the as-tested price to $112,690 plus on-road costs. Both cars are covered by 5-year unlimited kilometre warranties and 12-month servicing intervals, though Mercedes allows a greater distance between visits. It's also a lot more expensive though, to the tune of almost $1,600 over 5 years. The outputs of these two are very similar, but the engines themselves are quite different. The RS3 uses the latest version of Audi's long-serving 2.5 litre turbo 5-cylinder, producing 294 kilowatts and 500 newton meters through a 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox. 0 to 100 k's an hour is claimed to take just 3.8 seconds, which is a tenth faster than the Mercedes. The A45 has more grunt though. Its turbocharged 2-litre 4-cylinder produces an incredible 310 kilowatts and 500 newton meters through an 8-speed dual-clutch gearbox. Despite having the smaller engine, the AMG is officially the thirstier of the two, drinking 8.9 litres per 100k to the Audi's 8.3. But as always with cars like these, actually use the performance and you can expect to double that, if not more. Audi has long had a reputation for doing great interiors, and this latest RS3 is no exception. This is a really nice place to sit. There is some evidence that the RS3 is based on a car more than 40 grand cheaper with some of these cheap materials, but you kind of have to go looking for them. Everything you see and interact with feels really nice. The biggest plus though is that Audi has retained plenty of physical controls. If you compare this with, say, the Volkswagen Golf R, which has basically moved everything into this touchscreen, this is just so much easier to interact with. For instance, I need to adjust the fan speed. One click, done. There's also plenty of gear. Heated electric seats, 16-speaker Bang & Olufsen stereo, wireless smartphone mirroring and charging, head-up display, and it's all standard, which is nice. The only options are $1,900 for carbon inlays and $2,600 for a sunroof. The infotainment is also very good. Super easy to use and find your way around. It's got parking and traffic and weather updates. This is one car with a native sat-nav. It's actually better than what smartphone mirroring gives you. Because it's got Google Maps in its satellite view, everything is super clear, it's really easy to move around and zoom in and out, and you can even make it 3D. The digital instruments aren't as convincing. There are plenty of different views available, but you have to search for the fuel gauge. It all looks quite basic, and if you enter RS mode, the tachometer basically becomes illegible. Call me old-fashioned, but why can't I get it to just display a pair of dials? There's a surprising amount of room in the back of an RS3. I'm 180 centimeters tall, and I've got plenty of space in every direction. It's not quite the business class experience of the front though, closer to premium economy. We've got air vents and a pair of USB-C ports, but not the triple zone climate control of the cheaper Golf R, and the material quality takes a fair old dive compared to the front. The A45's interior is a bit like a newsreader who's wearing a suit and tie on camera, but shorts and thongs below the desk. Everything above a certain level is really flashy, but below that, it's a bit basic. You hop in and there's a lot of wow factor. We've got twin widescreen displays, these 5 beautifully designed air vents, strips of ambient lighting. It's definitely flashier than the Audi, but it's also easier to find plastics that would feel cheap in a 50 grand A180, let alone at double that. You can't really split the two in terms of equipment. The A45's still got plenty of bells and whistles, head-up display, heated seats, fancy stereos, etc, and like the Audi, it's all standard. The only option in here is the AMG Performance package, which adds the spoilers outside and these AMG Performance seats. The A45 was one of the first cars to use Merc's MBUX infotainment system, and there's a lot to get your head around. One of the more unusual things is how many ways you've got to interact with the system. It's a touchscreen, there's this central touchpad, this left-hand haptic pad on the steering wheel, or you can just say, "Hey Mercedes,
how can I help?"
for voice control. The touchscreen is probably easiest, though the central touchpad is handy for writing in addresses. The problem with right-hand drive is that for most people, they'll be using their non-dominant hand. A win for the lefties. There's wireless charging, but no wireless smartphone mirroring, a pair of USB-C ports, and the digital instruments, controlled using this right-hand haptic pad, are much more configurable than the Audi and more legible too. The rear seat isn't as nice in the A45. It's not too bad in terms of space, and these cup holders are pretty clever, but the main issue is the seat itself, which is firmer and less supportive than in the Audi. It's just not as comfortable. There's only one USB-C port too. As you'd hope at this price point, both these cars have all the toys, though overall would give the edge to the Audi. Both also have plenty of safety equipment, but the RS3 has been hit by the semiconductor shortage, and consequently blind spot warning and rear cross traffic alert are unavailable. It's an easy win for the A45 in terms of boot space, with 370 litres of room, compared to the RS3's relatively meagre 282 litres, though both those numbers expand considerably if you drop the 40-20-40 split rear seats. Okay, so that's the detail stuff sorted, and it's kind of neck and neck at this point, which is good. That means the winner will be found in the driving. I'm starting in the A45 as it's both a known quantity and the benchmark. This sets the standard that the RS3 has to beat. That said, it's been a little while since I've driven an A45, and I'd kind of forgotten how absolutely and incredibly awesome this car is. It is insane. The first A45 set new standards in terms of hot hatch performance, but it wasn't really the most engaging car to drive. This is a whole different animal. I'll start with the engine, because it just doesn't make any sense. Now, a 2-litre 4-cylinder producing 300 kilowatts isn't anything new. Lancer Evos have been doing that for 20 years, but they've typically had power bands about this big and have needed rebuilds every 10,000 Ks. The most amazing thing about this engine isn't necessarily the power, but the response. It picks up so quickly, suggesting it's got a small turbo, but then it gets more and more savage as you pile on the revs, suggesting it's got a big turbo. It's not engineering, it's witchcraft. It even sounds pretty good too, which isn't easy with a 4-cylinder. As is typical with AMG, there are multiple drive modes to choose from, selected via this rotary switch here, and you can tweak the individual settings via these buttons here. Takes a bit of getting used to, but works really well. In comfort, the ride is actually very good. It's nice and compliant, but there is a serious amount of road noise. Where this latest A45 really differs from its predecessor is its handling. Like I said, the old A45 was fast, but a bit one-dimensional to drive. You'd go turn, wait, throttle, repeat. You now have so much more influence over the car's behaviour with the brakes, and in particular, the throttle. The steering isn't super chatty, but it's well weighted. The brakes are strong, there's lots of grip, but as you drive it harder, you start to peel back layers of its personality. Now, if you get on the throttle mid-corner, it rotates the car sharply towards the exit, which means you can drive around any understeer and even have a cheeky wiggle of the tail. It feels a little bit contrived, but also a lot of fun. Having driven the A45 quite a lot on track too, I can tell you that when you really up it, far from falling apart, it actually comes alive. It's always subtly moving around, sliding but driving forward, like the old Ford Focus RS on steroids. This is a brilliant car. So, quite a high bar for the RS3 then. To be honest, prior to this test, I didn't really see how the Audi could match the Mercedes. If you've currently got an RS3, you might be looking at this new one thinking, no more power, a bit more tech, which is nice, but it's also a lot more money. It doesn't really seem worth it. A quick test drive might even confirm your suspicions. Sounds the same, steering feels pretty similar, rides a little bit calmer, but like the A45, there's quite a lot of road noise. Gearbox is a bit more hesitant at slow speed compared to the AMG, so it feels maybe more like a midlife update than an all-new model. But the thing is, to drive quickly, this new RS3 is a quantum leap over its predecessor. There really is no comparison. The work Audi has done on the chassis and handling of this car has absolutely transformed it. It's a simpler machine than the A45. There are 3 drive modes, but to be honest, I've just left it in auto, and when I want it to be angry, hit the RS button on the steering wheel, which is an individual setting for the steering, suspension, engine, all-wheel drive, etc, etc. Part of the problem with fast A3s has always been the amount of front-end push. This has especially been the case with the RS3. It's had that big 5-cylinder engine over the front wheels, and the all-wheel drive system hasn't been able to send enough torque to the rear to compensate. That's all changed. There's now tremendously strong front-end grip. The front tyres are actually 20mm wider than the rears, and like the A45, when you hit the throttle mid-corner, the car continues to rotate. So instead of having to wait and wait, you can start to unwind the steering and go. It feels more natural than the A45 and is tremendously confidence-inspiring. It reminds me a bit of the Nissan GT-R. It doesn't feel the same, but it's got that same sense of unflappability, of the car not driving for you, but helping you out by sending the power where it needs to go. The engine's full of torque and it's got that characteristic 5-cylinder warble, though I think the A45's is still more manic, and these carbon brakes might be a bit unnecessary, but they also work incredibly well. The idea of a $100,000 hot hatch is a tough pill to swallow, but honestly, these cars have such extraordinary abilities that you could make an argument they're both bargains. They're both so fast and so entertaining, yet are more comfortable and daily usable than ever. And now, I have to tell you the winner. It's a little bit academic, as both these cars are awesome and there's certainly a degree of splitting hairs. But the winner is the Audi. Not for the driving, in fact, I might even give that to the A45 by a fraction. But in base form, the RS3 is cheaper to buy, cheaper to service, and just feels a bit more premium. Really, drive both and buy the one you like. Heck, buy both. Thanks for watching.